The first presentation will be delivered by Chairman Ross Dawson of Australia's Advanced Human Technologies Group. He'll present under the theme of Creating the Future of Food, and let us invite him to the screen.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, if you can hear me, let's proceed with the slides you have, and please,
Indeed.
the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. It's a fantastic event and a critical topic. If we think about the future of humanity, of nations, of societies, then food has to be at the center of it. So we do need to be focusing on how we can create a prosperous food industry. So if we think more generally about what is happening in the world, we can safely say that the pace of change today in 2024 has never been this fast before. And this is not just in technology, it is not just in social change, it is also in the things which are underlying and shaping the food industry. And indeed, we will never be as slow again. We are going to see more change in the food industry in the coming 5 years than we've seen in the previous 20. And this is by necessity of what it is we can do. So what I want to do quickly this afternoon is first of all look at some of the big shifts which are shaping the world of the food and food industry. Go on to look at this idea of platforms and how we can build platforms to enable the prosperous food industry. Look at some of the aspects of innovation in the food industry and creating new possibilities. And finally, the leadership that is required to take us to this prosperous future. So if we start off by thinking of the macro shifts, the big things which are changing the world, and there are many of those, and I'd like to just point to a few of these that we need to understand and think about. And more broadly, if we think about the trends that are shaping the future of food, more and more people are wanting healthier and healthier food. There is this focus, this expectation that the food we have is healthy and that it is tasty. And at the same time, we need, as an industry, to understand that how can we scale production to more people, to higher levels of proficiency, to do this efficiently in terms of using the resources we have, in terms of the sometimes limited human resources. But in both sides, whether it is the consumers of the food or the producers, this focus on sustainability. Sustainability in terms of impact on terms of carbon emissions and climate, of course, but also sustainability in terms of the farming practices that allow us to continue to create food that is healthy and delicious, and we can do this effectively. One of course, the macro shifts we must understand is that the climate is shifting. And we can see in this chart, not only that the climate, that temperatures are increasing across the world. In the last year, 2023, standing up above this very concerning trend line. And in fact, every month for the last 12 months has been the hottest month on record. And this changes, of course, not just the temperature, but it changes water flow, it changes rainfall, it changes the nature of how it is that farming can be done, where it can be done, and how it is we can do that effectively. The other key trend to point to is that the expectations are rising on every front. We are getting more and more distinguished palates. We are distinguishing between flavors. We are expecting more in terms of quality, more in terms of not just the quality of our food, but also transparency in terms of the way in which practices are done, in terms of them being being positive for the climate and for, indeed the world at large, and not just in terms of the quality of the food. And the one other macro shift I would point to is simply that increasing uncertainty. And COVID made us quite clear that we cannot know when we will start to see issues in supply chains, in transport, in terms of health of food. And so food security, particularly at a national level, is more and more on the agenda. And we have to understand there will be further massive disruptions to food as we know it. So we do need to look at these macro shifts as shaping the world. Now, I would like to introduce this idea of platforms, which is fundamental across society at large, but is also particularly relevant and pertinent in the food industry. And this has been risen by the fact that we have a networked world. We have the internet as a network, technology creates networks, society is a network, organizations are networks, industries are networks, contagion and the way that spreads in networks, and food is also you understand the food industry, it is in fact a network of suppliers, of logistics, of flows, of the ways in which these are brought together to be able to, from the, their origins of, being able to farm and to produce food, going through to the consumer. Now, in a world of networks, the structure that is most relevant is that of a platforms. And we need to understand what is the nature of a platform. And this definition helps us to frame that, where a platform enables value to be created between participants that are not necessarily inside an organization. So you need an open infrastructure. You need to be able to have people access, to be able to have flows of information. And we need some governance as to how these things are done effectively. And we can look at this at, for example, our technology as a platform of standards. We have a number of platforms in technology which are built, our social platforms, which you are well aware of, that connect us to share information. And some of these have been very useful for amongst farmers and other people bringing food to market. And we also have our platform business models, such as your Ubers and your Spotifys and Naver and so on. Companies are becoming more and more platforms and bringing together many ways of connecting people. Cities or regions are platforms. And in fact, indeed, Seoul or other cities are platforms because they enable connections between them. But what is most important is that food is a platform. And this is one of the essences to understanding how it is we can create a prosperous future of the food industry, to understand some of those. And I will give some examples of the way in which platforms can enable effective value creation across the entire food industry. And this is the idea of understanding that the food production and the food distribution, the food consumption is an ecosystem of participants, which all must collaborate so that we work effectively together to be able to create that value. This, in essence, is the future of the food industry. So one example of this is that we start to track information across the entire supply chain from, for example, in this case, an animal who is then going through production, distribution, retailing, and critically the consumer actually becomes part of this system, where blockchain is one of the great enablers to be able to not just to be able to track information across a wide variety of participants in a system, but also to make sure that it is verifiable. You can verify that this information is correct and nobody has tampered with that information, which means that the end consumer can now have complete visibility of what has happened from the food they're eating, where it has come from, where it has gone, and many other aspects of that. There is a massive value in sharing data in agriculture. And so this actually image is from a company called Trace Genomics, which looks at the DNA within soil, the soil genomics, to analyze that and to be able to, from many, many, many different farms and different locations, to be able to give insights to any individual farmer on the genetic composition of their soil and how they can improve that to be able to increase the production, to be able to be more sustainable in their work. And there are many other initiatives around the world where many farms are creating an extraordinary amount of data today because we have sensors in the soil, of course, and to be able to share that so that production across the entire ecosystem is improved. The sharing of the data creates the value for greater efficiency, scalability, and quality of production. We are well familiar with this idea of the Internet of Things. We can also think of the Internet of Food, where we can track at any point what is happening to a particular food, where it is going, whether it has encountered different temperatures, how long it has been in storage, and to be able to monitor and understand that. Of course, helping the logistics, helping the efficiency, using that data for artificial intelligence to optimize the logistics, but also to be able to create far more visibility and transparency for the retailer and ultimately the consumer. Now, if we think about innovation, and this example just shows something may happen in both restaurants and kitchens, where You start to see this automation, and automation has been applied in many aspects of the food industry. So if we think more broadly about the innovation landscape, every participant in the food industry needs to be thinking about their business models and the competences they have to grow them. So if we, this uses a framework which comes from a Harvard Business Review, and I've used this to apply this to the food industry. And if we think, this idea of routine innovation, where you have an existing business model, the way in which you are currently working, and your existing competences. And this might be, for example, introducing new types of packaging or to be able to have new products. This is all part of the regular routine innovation that happens, any participant in the food industry will well understand. But there's also the potential to push out where there are new competences which are required. And so, for example, Cargill is developing nutraceutical-based products where, in fact, eating the food is a form of medicine. It is helping address potential deficiencies in diet or to be able to address particular issues relevant to the individual. And General Mills using precision fermentation to create proteins which are identical to dairy but not actually coming from an animal. And this is a powerful way where a new technology is be able to create foods which meet, in this case, demand from the industry and from some consumers, and being able to do that in a very effective manner. We also have disruptive business models, so using the existing competences of food creation and delivery, but being able to create a new business model. So, for example, a meal subscription delivery. You may deliver food in various things, may deliver actual prepared meals in various kinds. And PepsiCo is just one example, which is choosing to go direct to consumer. So instead of through distributors, logistics, retailers, and so on, and going directly to consumers. So this is a new business model, which requires as well new competences. And there are now more different architectural structures to what food participants can do. So Nestle is using its health sciences division to create personalized nutrition services where the food is created for the individual, or a set of food products are designed for the individual and who they are and what can best serve them. And Unilever is using, for example, artificial intelligence, massive amounts of data from farms, productions, consumers, to be able to change how it develops products and change its portfolio of products and how those are produced and the ways in which these create value between each other. So this just provides some examples of the types of innovation that are required to drive the innovation in the food industry. And this includes building new business models and also requiring a set of new competences, including both technologies and of food technologies and sometimes digital technologies. Now, if we think about alternative proteins, there's of course a big rise in this. There's a forecast of $24 billion in alternative proteins in the coming by the end of the decade. And it's interesting to see that in the US, the growth has tailed off a little. It has not increasing more recently, whereas in the European Union, it is continuing to increase. This particular image, in fact, shows insect burgers. So these are burgers which mimic the protein from meat, in fact, created from insects. And there are, of course, a wide variety of different types of protein which are created from mushroom type farming, in terms of algae, in terms of insects, and of course in terms of cultured meat, which is beginning to grow. So if we think about one of the most important technologies is that of precision fermentation. There's an array of technologies and innovations to be able to advance food production. In precision fermentation, essentially are using genetic modification in order to create products which are in fact not genetically modified. You are, for example, creating bacteria which can create proteins that are identical to meat or dairy or other products. And to points to this. One of the key points of precision fermentation is that it is highly scalable. So this can be done in very large quantities, and it is very precise. You can be extremely precise around exactly what proteins, what amino acids, other things that are being created. And this helps, for example, to be able to create the nutraceutical type products which are beneficial to the person who consumes these. Going on to that point, we have a company, Nutrigenomics, which does genetic testing of individuals for to be able to personalize the nutrition for the individual. And interesting anecdote, I was fairly recently in Saudi Arabia to speak at the Future Food Summit. So I gave a keynote where I spoke about this company, Nutrigenomics, and at the end of the session, someone came up to me and says, well, I'm the CEO of Nutrigenomics. It's a company based in Toronto, based on deep research. It comes out of the University of Toronto, and it is and so since then he offered, and I now have had my own genetic profile tested, which give me insights into the food which I should or should not be eating, and things which assess my health and support me in my fitness. And this points to a world where those people who choose to can have more and more insight into who they are individually, and so their personal profile can guide their nutrition and potentially the creation of specific foods, as I pointed out in the Nestle Health Services. One other technology which is very relevant in distribution is nano packaging, essentially the use of nano materials in packaging, and this many benefits of this. This can extend the time where products remain fresh, that they are safe, protects them from bacteria, and in fact, sensors can be built into the nano packaging in order to be able to, for example, assess whether the temperature has gone outside a particular range and to ensure that this packaging is safe. So, there are many innovations in packaging as well as in the food production, and this is an important part of this food ecosystem of being able to create value. And just show this video of a company called Kana, which actually doesn't exist anymore, but I think it's an interesting example of what they have done is what they call molecular food creation. Essentially on something which sits on a shelf inside a kitchen. It has these different canisters that you can put inside it, and then you can build and design your own drink and make all of the choices around that. You can then use one which others have created. And so this means that this is part of the shift to where food production could potentially be happening in the home. And this also goes this idea of 3D printing of food, and also a little bit to that idea of the automation, which I showed in the earlier video of what's happening in the home, where as we start to see more and more of these technologies, the food technologies going to the home, it means that people can have fresh food, which is then prepared or brought together or created in their own home, as opposed to that happening a long way away in food production facilities or factories. Now, finally, thinking about the leadership, and I think this is critically important for this event, and thinking about Foodpolis, its role, and the Korean nation, and its ability to build a prosperous future for its food industry. So one of the frameworks which I use across a wide variety of industries, but is particularly relevant in the food industry, is essentially this framework for leadership across industries. It needs to start with a vision of what it is you are creating. Go on to think about the foundations, what it is that enables that to come to pass, the roadblocks, the paths, and the collaboration and the action. So I'd like to just go through those. So first of all, thinking about the vision. And the first, in order to be able to create a prosperous, scalable, efficient industry which creates healthy and delicious food for the Korean food industry, is to envisage that, to be able to say what is possible, what is the best possible world to be able to we could create for the Korean food industry. What does that look like? What types of foods are available? How are we ensuring that there is the resilience to external shocks? How are we ensuring that there's as nutritious as possible? How we make sure that the distribution is putting hands that? How do we ensure that there is as little waste as possible? What is that vision for what that could be, the best possible? Then thinking about what are the foundations to that? What are the institutions? Foodpolis Korea, of course, existing food industries. What are the business models? What are the platforms which can connect the people? What are the systems that will enable this vision? And is there anything which is missing now? Things which are not there, which need to be there in order to be able to create the vision which you can imagine for this highly prosperous future for the Korean food industry. But at the same time, you also need to recognize the roadblocks. There's many things which are blocking the potential. These could be existing structures, they could be they could be regulations, they could be consumer attitudes. There's a whole array of, or simply just existing structures, for example, for logistics or distribution. So we need to recognize what are these blocks and understand, think about how it is we can remove or bypass these blocks. So, and from that, thinking about what are the pathways. We've got a vision, we can understand that, we can see the foundations we want, we can understand the roadblocks and think about, well, what are the paths? How can we get from where we are now in order to be able to create that? What is feasible? What are the milestones which will tell us that we are on track to move us towards our positive vision? But the critical part, and I think this is the role of Foodpolis Korea and this event as well, is the collaboration. And this goes to my earlier point around the platforms, where if we have the platforms that enable the connections, enable value creation across an entire ecosystem, then we can say, well, this is the collaboration. These are the people that need to collaborate, how it is we can support that. And of course, we finally need to be thinking about the action that is created needs to be done in order to move towards that vision for the potential of the Korean food industry. And coming back to thinking about what I just earlier discussed, in understanding the macro shifts that are shaping the future of the food industry, in understanding the nature of the platforms which are intrinsic to the flows of value and data and information and food across the industry, and the innovations that are possible and which can drive the future of the food industry. So, I think the words of James Cass are very relevant in this context. The finite players play within boundaries and the infinite players play with boundaries. And so to create this vision of a prosperous, incredibly prosperous future for the Korean food industry, we need to play with the boundaries of what has been done in the past and to be able to create new possibilities for the shape of the food industry, which can create that. And I think that we are really at the dawn of a new era. And it's delighted to be part of an initiative, an organization, an event, which is all about creating an extraordinary future for the Korean food industry. So thank you for your time and attention. I think we might have some time for some questions and very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chairman Dawson, for your thoughtful keynote presentation. So for those who have questions regarding the presentation, please leave your questions on the chat. And I do see a number of questions coming up from the chat room. And are we okay to proceed to the Q&A session?
Yes, certainly.
Then let us have a question from Professor Choi Han-seok of Korea National University of Agriculture and Fisheries. Good afternoon, Professor Choi.
네, 안녕하세요.
Hello, good afternoon.
Your question.
저는
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. When I have expertise about food processing. And first of all, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the share the excellent ideas and insightful opinions about food industry. So this is a meaningful occasion indeed. And as you introduced in the presentation, we are experiencing very fast the changes in our society. It is very difficult to catch up the changing and the technologies. So, well, I teach new technologies to students, and I'm very busy to catch up new changes. So I fully agree with what you shared in the presentation, and I believe we are actually pursuing new changes. So my question is the follow. So you introduce various issues. Which of the issues discussed today is the most realistic and hold the highest potential for future developments? Could you share your opinions about that?
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback and comment. I think the most important single thing is the sharing of data and information across the food industry. And that goes from the agriculture, so the sharing of data across agriculture, the sharing of data across food, data and information and knowledge across the production sector, the enable efficiencies in the logistics through the sharing of data and information there. And finally, and most importantly, that all of this data and information is available to the end consumer in ways that are easily available and help them to be able to make better decisions. Because ultimately, of course, it is the people who are consuming the food that need that information. But those platforms that enable that sharing of data and information, I believe, will be the single most important thing in creating a prosperous food industry.
Okay, I hope that answered to the question. And thank you for the question and the answer once again. And thank you very much, Chairman Dawson, for predicting the changes of future food industry and suggesting our path forward. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.